What's going on, everybody? Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and whatever time it is, and welcome back to another video with you, man, the Measureaholic. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to my Rise of the Julia campaign for Total War Rome 2 Divided Impera, episode 16. Today we are starting with a little bit of an overview of the entire geopolitical landscape that is Central Europe, or the Central Mediterranean. In the last episode, we were continuing the Numidian Wars, and we will continue those in this episode. However, I thought you guys might like to see the overall stance and geopolitical situation up here. As you can see, we now control Carthage and Capsa, as well as all of Italy, most of Sicily, but we do have an ally controlling the northern town there, Panormus. Carthage is a little bit of a mess. It's kind of spread out, and we have split it down kind of the middle, not really, but at the same time, kinda. But anyway, the big thing that you're going to be noticing is to the north is that big white blob from the Odrysian kingdom. The Odrysians are barbarians from northern Thrace, and they have somehow migrated all the way to the west here, and they're going to be a real big problem moving forward. They have a very powerful army, especially when it comes to going up against heavy troops. Up here in the far north, we can see that the Suebi, the Germans, have basically united all of Germania. They're going to be a really big threat in the late game, I reckon. But we'll have to see how that goes. As I said, you can see the Odrysians here, spreading out from the east to west. Their capital is on the eastern edge there, just on the coast of the Black Sea, which is interesting. I don't know how they expanded out here, but they did, somehow. To our east, Epirus controls pretty much all of Greece. There is Athens still barely alive. They have their capital, and then they also have the capital of Pergamon, I believe, over in western Anatolia. However, Epirus is basically the master of Greece. Over here in Iberia, though, and in Africa, it seems that Carthage is still the main threat. It looks like Carthage has all of Iberia. They still have some holdings in northern Africa, and today we are going to be dealing with those holdings, especially on the coast. To the southeast here, we're going to be trying to focus on getting rid of them, so that way we only have to fight in one direction after that, which would be fighting west towards Spain. They also have the Massaili just inland a little bit, so we're going to be dealing with those as well. Hopefully today we can see the end of them. Whether that will actually happen or not, we'll have to wait and see. But that's basically the landscape at the moment. You did see some Massalian territory up in the north, but for the most part, they're not really a big, powerful faction anymore. Carthage and the Odrysians have done too much of a number on them, sadly. Anyway, today we're going to start off with the conquering of the small town of Leptis Magna, or LPQY, as it is on the campaign map. But I wanted to figure out what exactly that meant, so I did some little googling and found out the name of the town was actually Leptis Magna. I believe the Magna part was there anyway. I'm going to be using the 1st Republican fleet in conjunction with the 1st Legion. A perfect 1-2 combo to take out the large navy that's stationed here in addition to the small garrison. While it might seem like it might be a little dicey, it really just was a little bit too simple. We only took just over 100 losses, I believe. It was really straightforward. For the most part, most of these conquerings of these small towns are going to be the same deal. Where I can use my navy, I will. But for the most part, we won't really need to. The 1st Legion could pretty much handle it all. It's just a matter of us marching the 1st Legion the distance that it needs to go. Here, just a few turns later, we're taking Ufranza. I did have the navy accompany the Legion here, but it was entirely unnecessary. They didn't really end up doing anything. And I believe I even auto-resolved this battle, whereas the last one I fought manually, just to try and micromanage taking out the enemy navy a little bit better. So we did take a few more losses here, nothing dramatic. We can definitely recover it within a few turns, so we're just going to sit around and do that for a bit. And then back up here in the north in Sicily, Panormus somehow loses their trade agreement with us, and I go up here to investigate, and it is because Carthage has taken over. They've launched a surprise invasion of Sicily. I really wasn't expecting this. It was a really cool move by the AI. And it's also a potentially disastrous move. They could easily take at Cragis and maybe even Syracuse itself, although there is a large garrison there. but they do have a very large army. They're a full 20 stack, so that's really scary to deal with. I was looking through my armies in North Africa, trying to figure out which one would be best to send to deal with this new threat. I didn't want to send the 1st Legion because they were my sieging machine, basically. However, I did initially begin to send them on the fleet. But you're going to see here I changed my mind, and we do something a little bit different, and I begin recruiting units for the commander of the Carthaginian garrison who I have stationed there. We do have access to some new Libyan units, so now is going to be a perfect time to put them to the test. During the interim, the Masali come groveling to us for peace once again. The only demand that I have of them for peace is to break their client state with Carthage, their client state agreement, and they refuse to, which is funny because they're on the brink of annihilation and they're still loyal to their masters. But oh well, it's interesting to see how much they're struggling. We hit the year 265 BC, which marks the beginning of the Punic War historically, with the Battle of Messina. I just think it's a little bit interesting seeing the history of how it actually developed compared to what's happening while I'm playing. You guys might not find it too interesting, but I do scroll down very slowly just so you guys can see what the go is. Here in the Carthaginian garrison, you can see I have a bunch of Libyan troops. I've recruited all the troops I can, and I'm now hiring some Numidian archers as well. I don't really have too much more time to risk sitting around and not responding to the new Carthaginian threat, so I'm going to be sending the army over there. Very undermanned and very under-equipped, so this is going to be a little bit of a scary fight. I land the army out of Kragas. I was hoping I could recruit mercenaries, but unfortunately our money was at an all-time low. And in addition to that, the Carthaginians gave me an opportunity I just could not refuse. And as you can see here when I zoom in, the fleet of the army of the Carthaginians has now become a fleet. They are now apparently evacuating Sicily now that they've seen our response. And they're trying to get away on transport ships. So before they have a chance to do that, I'm going to blockade them inside the town. This way, whenever we do end up assaulting the town, their actual army will be forced to spawn in on transport ships rather than on land, giving us a massive advantage, and hopefully we can obliterate them before they land.
Commander.
Now that the navy had them blockaded, I sent in the Carthaginian garrison without any reinforcements, sadly, to attack the city. And so here we are. I thought I'd start out by checking out the new Libyan troops that we have. They're going to prove to be very interesting units. As you can see, they're actually really heavily armored, basically just like our Principe. So I was really curious to see how they would perform. I've never used them before. This is our first time in this campaign, definitely. So it's going to be interesting. Perhaps they will be of equal value to our Principes. Here are the Numidian archers. Nothing too crazy about them. Basically no armor, no melee weapons, but they do have some decent skill with the bows, so we're going to see just how effective they are. And of course here is our general or commander, who has his own little Praetorian Guard, which is basically just veteran Principes up here on the hill with his army. We're trying to get a safe distance from the town itself so we wouldn't fight the garrison too early, because I wanted the initial part of the battle to be about my navy chasing down their transport ships. As you can see, there they all are in the distance, transport ships. However, my navy is taking sweet time getting onto the battlefield. I was a little bit worried. I was really trying to rush my ships forward, because if this army landed, we would actually have a really tough time dealing with it. We probably would lose, to be honest. So I rushed my navy forward, all the units ready to ram the enemy ships. I mean, not batter ram. That wouldn't make sense. But anyway, as you can see, they're like beelining it for the coast. The AI had a really good idea here. They even sent some ships out to like sacrifice themselves towards me. You can see the skirmisher ships are actually doing a lot of damage, even though they're just transport ships. Before my ships can even get too close, they're killing my crews with javelins and arrows. So it's really, it's a tough chase, and a lot of my ships are going to take heavy casualties due to it. However, we do catch up to them eventually due to the double time that I was forcing all my ships into. They're probably exhausted, but it didn't matter to me. We needed to catch as many ships as possible to have any chance of winning this battle. I'm going to be ramming all these ships though, and as you can see, it's kind of like they've divided their transport ships. About a third of them are landing, while the rest of the little fleet that they have is coming in to engage us. And that's basically what's going to happen. About a third of their troops are going to land unmolested. However, we are going to wipe out a significant portion of their little transport ships here. You can see on the right there though, I was losing even more ships, which is very troubling. But anyway, as I said, they landed their troops on the beach and they formed up in front of my army. The enemy garrison wasn't out just yet, but they were working their way out. So while that was all going on, I decided to land my own troops to try and even out the fight to come a little bit. The melee troops that we have coming off the ships are basically just Principes, and even though they are smaller in size, they're actually still excellent troops. In the first few episodes of this entire campaign, you guys saw the devastation that these troops can inflict on the enemy when used correctly. So I'm going to place them on my left-hand flank, and hopefully we can use them well. I reformed my line up here to try and deal with the Carthaginian advance. They are going to advance on us fairly quickly here in a second. Unfortunately, I won't even have time to prepare my other reinforcements that are coming in off the ships. But we are in a fairly good position up on the hill here, and you can see just why it's a good position. Our archers, the Numidian archers, are having an excellent time barraging the enemy while they're trying to rush up against us. They just really are decimating the enemy troops, especially since they're so lightly armored. And then the Pila from our Libyan troops is going to be devastating as well, just as if it were from our Principes, which is awesome. The right-hand flank gets hit by their cavalry, while our left-hand flank takes the brunt of the Carthaginian advance. They move their troops pretty much all along the coast, but then there is a section on the right-hand side that you can see, although they are a little bit weaker than the troops towards the coastline. So the main focus of the battle is going to be dealing with the coastline troops as quickly as possible. I begin to use my smaller Principe units that came off the ships to outflank the enemy army. That's basically the best thing I can use them for in this situation. If I had them in the front line, they would do very well, but they would also get killed unnecessarily. The numbers of the Carthaginians are just too great to go up 1-for-1 against my smaller naval units. But anyway, on the right hand side you can see that we're just demolishing the enemy, and their cavalry was pointless after we hit them with our Pila. And then the few troops that they did send were basically just peasants. They really didn't have much of a chance against us. I begin surrounding the enemy army here. As you can see, there's only a couple units left on the right hand side. My archers are supporting very nicely. Most of them are getting low on ammo now. It's been a few minutes, but the archers really did a really good number on the enemy. I can't really emphasize that enough. I was actually really surprised. And although they didn't necessarily get hundreds and hundreds of kills, they did cause the enemy to rout, and the Carthaginian army here is very low on morale in general, even though we haven't killed their general yet. I haven't even found him actually. Apparently he was holding himself back in reserve, and if you're if you're paying attention, you could see him back in the background towards the town. Here we can see the devastation my arrows are causing on the enemy. In addition to our Libyan troops and our smaller Principe units outflanking them, they just can't handle it. It's just too much of a good combination. It's too solid. Not only that, but you can tell which troops are part of the garrison and which ones are part of the army just by the amount of troops that are staying behind and fighting us. I'll be zooming in shortly so you guys can see, but you can tell that the actual army of the Carthaginians is holding out for a lot longer than the garrison did. They hold disciplined formations against us in their hoplite phalanxes, and while they are incredibly stubborn and very annoying to try and get to rout, I was even using flaming arrows, as you can see there. Eventually they are going to rout and they are going to get cut down. They're not going to get too many kills against us, even though the majority of the enemy army has routed by now. But they were very annoying, to be honest. We surrounded them multiple times. We got multiple charges in. We had archers firing arrows down upon them. And so it was just a couple units left there, elite hoplites, who were just holding out for more than I would like them to. But anyway, such is life. But we do deal with them very quickly. Surprisingly, there was a small garrison left back in the town, and I had to defeat them after about 30 minutes of fighting their actual army, these few units were still sitting back and just doing nothing. We surrounded and obliterated them, and they routed very, very quickly. All in all, we actually won the battle fairly decisively. We only lost a few hundred units, and most of those were skirmishes on my ships. The enemy lost massive casualties. Over 6,000 troops were killed, although about 2,500 to maybe 3,000 of those were from the actual enemy army. The rest were garrison troops. But either way, Panormus is now ours, which is actually pretty excellent. This worked out perfectly. I got rid of an ally who did nothing for me, and now I get full control of Sicily itself, which is excellent. But as you can see, we did lose a couple ships in the process, which does suck a little bit, but not a big deal in the end of it. Here you can see me renaming the Carthaginian garrison to the 1st Auxiliary Legion. This is to honor the Libyan and basically the Numidian combination troops who were excellent in the battle. They just proved to be incredibly useful. The mainline infantry held just as well as our Principes did, and they took almost no casualties. That'll be very useful moving forward. Now down here in the southeast, the 1st Legion is continuing its march southeast and taking the town of Orgilla. It was a very easy assault. We lost almost no troops, and due to that we're actually going to be able to march west instantly. I end up liberating the town, creating a new faction who turns out to be apparently reliable, so we'll see how that goes. We get a little bit of trade with them and get a little bit of money for the honor of being an ally of Rome. But this is good because I need to create a buffer between me and Egypt. Egypt isn't really liking me too much. Apparently they like Carthage, and so the more I annihilate Carthage, the more the Egyptians hate me, which is a little bit scary. I know we can defeat them, but it's going to take a lot of money and a lot of men to do it, and we just can't afford to waste it at the moment. So hopefully we can maintain good relations, or at least get some good relations. Now here you can see the 1st Legion is in serious trouble. They are stuck in the Garamantian desert in the middle of summer. This is absolutely horrible, and due to that we're going to have to do a very unfavorable assault on the city of Garama itself. It has a massive garrison in addition to half a stack of army actually garrisoned inside the city, so this is going to be an incredibly difficult siege. If we don't win this, the 1st Legion will probably be obliterated. And here we are on the battle map. A very large city, not too multi-dimensional. It just has one major large wall, which is nice. I have my army presented at the front, nothing to mention about my formation. I just have my archers and siege equipment at the front to try and do as much damage as possible before we end up heading in. But here you can see it's basically one massive long wall. Pretty straightforward. There is a small keep area, but there's no gate, so we should be able to get into there and kill the general fairly easily, in theory. But we'll see just how well this siege goes. Keep in mind, if we do lose this siege, not only are we going to suffer massive casualties, but the desert is going to claim so many lives, and so I really do think that the 1st Legion might end up getting destroyed if the battle goes poorly. But so far we've been walking over the Numidians like it's been nothing, so we'll see how it goes. Here you can see my ballista are engaging the city walls. They're trying to punch a couple of holes for us, while my Principes are actually going to take the ladders as opposed to my Galatian auxiliaries. The Galatians are going to go in through the holes while my Principes take the walls, and then we also have more Principes in reserve to back up the Galatians. Getting some nice close-ups of the army forming up. Absolutely stunning units. I really love looking at them. Hopefully you guys do too, and it looks good on the 1440p resolution that you guys should be seeing this in. But anyway, we move the army up slowly. My archers begin engaging. My auxiliaries are ready to march through the holes in the wall. We have our openings on either side of the main gate. And then here you can see my archers engaging. I'm going to be really relying on them to try and do a lot of damage before we go in. The enemy has a massive garrison. This is some 5,000-6,000 troops or something. It's a really large garrison, and so it's going to take a long time for us to penetrate into the city, and hopefully we can do it without the enemy skirmishers bombarding us, which is an issue that we encountered in the siege of Carthage itself. And it might be a really big issue here. We'll have to see how the battle develops. As you can see, they've basically given us the walls, and they are all forming up inside, ready for us to charge on through, instead of engaging us on the walls, which is a very interesting tactic. and it turns out to prove to be very successful for them, and we're going to see why shortly. Within just a few seconds of my troops getting inside, the Galatians are already wavering. You can see the unit cards on the bottom there. They're basically at half strength now, at least one of the units is. And my Principes are coming in, but they are also actually going to begin to get bombarded. I am trying to send in reinforcements as quickly as I can. We need to get as many troops in as quickly as possible. But it's a very slow process, and by the time I have reinforcements moving in to try and help out, my Galatians are on the brink of breaking, at least on the right hand side. They're very close to routing. We do make a little bit of progress though. We do get some troops inside the walls. The right hand side is a little bit more locked in, but the left hand side we will be making our way down the back streets of the city, at least slowly but surely. The AI though does a really good job of handling our incursions into the city, and they begin to try and bottleneck us, and they do it really effectively. Here, this is a couple minutes into the assault, and my Principe units are starting to fall apart. I just had a Principe unit rout right there and then, and that's because the enemy skirmishers are coming, and they have so many skirmishers, it's ridiculous. And the javelins are just too heavy and too damaging to not be a threat to my heavily armored Principes. Even though they are so heavily armored, the javelins just go right through them. So I'm trying to get my troops into melee engagements before the enemy skirmishers can just whittle them down, but it's not being too successful so far. My Galatians are almost entirely in full retreat, and I've already lost a Principe unit with another one well on the way. I try to manually have my archers target the main blob of the enemy troops. If you right click on the enemy, often your archers will bug out and they'll try and move in awkward positions, so I always recommend you try and do manual firing with your archers during city assaults at least, but in open battlefields it should be fine. The enemy charges their cavalry into us as well. I have my cavalry moving into the city slowly. As you can see, there are hundreds already dead and thousands more to follow. This is an incredibly bloody battle. It really was such a slog. This went on for a very long time. We were stuck and we weren't really making ground. My Principes were routing nearly constantly. And as you can see here a few minutes later, I've lost about half of my Principes. It's pretty devastating. The Galatians did very, very little. My cavalry isn't having too much of an impact. And over here on the left-hand side, we're actually losing the entire left flank. My Principes got annihilated over there. This is going really badly so far. The one good news that I have is that the enemy is also getting whittled down. Few of their units are beginning to waver, and if I can outmaneuver them well enough, we might have a chance here. But it is starting to look like we actually might need to retreat. I was really considering it at this stage. You can see my general is up by the main gate. I was trying to get him to boost the morale of my troops. And this was basically the point where I was trying to figure out, do I commit to this fight and really go all in, or do I try and save what I can and hope that the desert is kind to me? I didn't trust the attrition of the harsh desert summer, so instead I'm going to do the complete opposite and charge on in with everything we got. I'm going to send in my general first, and he's going to try and punch through a hole that we have in the enemy lines and get behind them. My general unit isn't anything too special, but if he manages to pull off what I'm trying to get him to pull off, then this could turn the entire tide of the battle in our favor. And this is, of course, the current leader of the Julia faction, our current ruler of Rome. So this is a very risky maneuver. If we end up losing this, then this could be very dramatic for all of Rome. My general gets in nicely. He doesn't get stuck too heavily, and then he is forming up to do a nice juicy recharge against this main body of enemy troops in the center. You can see a lot of them are just skirmishers, as their mainline melee troops have routed or been killed. And so due to them just being skirmishers, a lot of them are actually going to take this charge really harshly. My general gets an excellent charge, and then with that we actually rout a very large portion of that main contingent right there. And then it's just a matter of trying to repeat the process as quickly as possible. The faster I do it, the faster we can try and help out our left and right hand flanks. You have to keep in mind the enemy troops are wavering, but they've killed so many of my own troops that we are still on the brink of falling apart here. All it takes is my general to die or a few Principe units to rout, and then we have absolutely no chance. But we do get a major break on the right hand flank here. For whatever reason, the enemy troops started to retreat. I'm not sure why. We didn't really outflank them too well, but they did retreat regardless, so I was more than happy to take that. We do get a minor breakthrough into the center, but the enemy diverts more troops to stop us in this street here, so I'm trying to use my general once again to outflank them and rear charge them. Here I'm getting so desperate that I'm committing all of my Cretan archers to the fighting. They are excellent units for archers. They're not exactly mainline melee units by any means, but they do have some decent armor, which is going to allow them to at least survive for a little bit longer than most, what most archers would in a melee fight. So they're actually going to end up becoming extremely helpful, and now archers are holding the entire left flank on their own here. You can see where my general is coming in to get some nice juicy rear charges, and this is where the battle comes back once again in our favor. We begin routing enemy troops, and even though we've taken incredible losses, my general's bodyguard is on the verge of being wiped out. Honestly, it's taken nearly half its casualties. Things are actually looking very good. The rest of the flanks of the enemy have all retreated so far. There is still an enemy general we need to deal with, but if I can rout this one unit that's sitting here on its own, then we have a really good chance of actually winning. I don't know how we managed to pull it back. It's basically entirely on the shoulders of our leader, Niasura, who is apparently an incredible Roman general. This is his first time really getting into the melee himself. He hasn't done too much besides that. He has been a very capable commander so far, but before then he was just he wasn't really into the melee fighting itself. So this is where he really stepped up to the plate and ended up winning the battle for us almost single-handedly, to be honest. He really routed a lot of troops, and then up here we are just annihilating the enemy general. He's up here on his own. Apparently he was too good to get into the mainline fighting, unlike our leader, and so he's going to pay the price for it. My troops have rested by this time now, and we're also outflanking them with archers. And then my general comes in, as he is still keen for blood and ready to take on the enemy general himself if need be. We begin to outflank him while he's wavering. Then by the time we even form up for a actual charge into him, he routs terrified, as he should. And with that, the First Legion, led by our leader Niasura, somehow takes the city of Garama. Here we can see the statistics if you like to take a look at Pyrrhic victory. Apparently our archers did excellent, cavalry did pretty good, and then you can see amongst the Principes which units got obliterated by the enemy skirmishers almost instantly, and it's basically those units who are only in the 2 digits. The ones who didn't get hit by skirmishers though did excellent, and that is basically what they should be doing. So unfortunately we lost a lot of men, but we didn't use too many units, or we didn't lose any, sorry. We only lost 3 units, one of which was a mercenary unit, the Galatians. We lost a cavalry unit, and then we lost 1 Principe unit, which is a shame, especially since our Principes are such veterans. But it's a price that we have to pay to save the rest of the army and take the city itself. And in honor of the so many dead, I'm actually going to occupy the city. I really wanted to just liberate it and create a new client state in Africa. However, the client states, the client allies I should say, have become incredibly untrustworthy and unreliable, and so I'm going to be occupying a lot more than what I would like to, but it's basically a no-brainer. We have no choice. Either way, the First Legion now has safe haven in Garama. The summer itself won't affect the Legion too much, although they do need to replenish eventually, but now they can rest up and enjoy a well-deserved rest in the city. Besides that, that's all we have time for today. With that, we're basically at the end of the Numidian Wars. They only have a few towns left in North Africa, and then after we deal with that, it's on to the rest of the Western Mediterranean. So thank you all for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed. See you in the next one.